Hey guys, it's Dad with Dad's Guide to Adulting. I hope you're doing well and that you're having a great day. In this video, we're going to continue talking about the process of buying your first car, and in particular, we're going to talk about sales contracts. This is not the contract for the financing of your car where you borrow the money for the loan. This is the actual agreement where you're going to sign to buy the car and pay the dealership. Now, if you buy your car from a dealership, you're always going to have a written sales contract, one prepared by their lawyers. If you buy from a private seller, another individual person, it's up to you guys to decide whether you want to have a contract or not. It's generally a good idea to do that. You can have a lawyer draft up a relatively simple contract for you that covers the key terms that you want spelled out in the agreement, including the price, whether there are any warranties and that sort of thing. In this video, we're going to talk mostly about the kind of contracts you're going to see from dealers, because I'm going to assume you're buying your first car from a dealership. When it comes to signing the paperwork, the first thing to keep in mind is to be patient. Don't let the excitement or emotion of the moment overwhelm you and rush you into signing things that may not be in your interest. You've put in a lot of hours of research, you finally found the car, you've agreed on a purchase price, and you sit down to sign the paperwork and you just want it over with at that point. Now's a good time to take a deep breath, slow down, and be patient. The contract that you sign for your car is what's going to control your rights and your remedies if there is a problem with the car after you buy it. All of your previous work will be wasted if you don't make sure that the terms that you discussed with the salesman actually made it into the contract. Sometimes sellers will count on your impatience or your unfamiliarity with legal documents to try and sneak things into the contract, such as additional hidden fees that you hadn't discussed, so you need to spend the time to try and go over that. When you sit down to review your contract, it's also a good idea to have with you a copy of the buyer's guide for that car. The buyer's guide is a document that's usually put in the window of a used car when it's getting ready to be sold. I think they also do it for new cars as well. But it includes a lot of important information about the vehicle that you probably use when you were negotiating your purchase. So have that with you, and it can be helpful to look at some of those terms like the mileage, the warranties, make sure everything that you were sold is actually contained in the agreement. One thing to keep in mind, they are what is known as contracts of adhesion, and basically that means you have very little ability to change a lot of the terms. They're drafted by their lawyers, and they're going to tell you that the contracts are standard, and that's just the way they do it. That doesn't mean you should agree to everything. If you have any questions about it, you have the right to have a lawyer take a look at the contract and determine whether or not there are provisions in there that are bad for you. If you don't want to hire a lawyer, I understand that. And in this video, we'll talk about some of the key terms that you should look at. One thing to keep in mind, as always, Dad's Guide to Adulting and I do not provide legal advice. If you want legal advice about a particular contract, make sure you talk to a lawyer in your own state. So what are the key terms in the contract? Well, you're going to look for the names and the contact information. Make sure everything in there is correct. Your address, your email address, if they're going to be contacting you about any rebates or recalls or other issues that pop up. Check on the make, model, and year of the vehicle. Make sure that the car that's described in the paperwork is the same one you looked at and test drove. Check the vehicle identification number, the VIN. Make sure that the same VIN on the car is the one that's in the sales contract. Make sure all the provisions about the price are correct. If you were doing a trade-in, make sure that the price of the trade-in is also correct. If they've offered you any rebates in the negotiations or special offers or deals, make sure those are included in the actual written agreement. Watch out for hidden fees. Now, this is one of the things I think pops up a lot on these contracts is the dealer will discuss a price with you. You'll agree on a purchase price for the car, and when you get the sales document, it has an additional $400 or $500 dealer fee. Well, that's garbage. If it's a dealer fee, that should be included in the price of the car. Make sure that the written agreement does not include any additional fees that you did not already agree to pay. Also check to see if they are charging you for any items that they said would be given for free. Sometimes salesmen make offers and promises about things they'll do for free, an additional feature that'll be added to the car at no charge. Make sure that the agreement does not reflect a charge for something you were promised for free. There should be a line item in the contract for that item, and it should say 0 next to it. Check also on the warranties and make sure that it spells out the warranties correctly. If there's a manufacturer's warranty that you had discussed, make sure it's in there. Dealer's warranty, same thing. Make sure that ideally, if you're the buyer, the contract does not say as is, because that means you're buying the car without any warranties, and if there are any problems, they're on you and you have to pay to fix them rather than the dealership. Also, check on the registration and the tax information. Oftentimes, contracts will determine who has to file the car registration paperwork with the county or state Department of Motor Vehicles or the local tax authorities. Sometimes the dealership does that, sometimes you have to. Make sure you know who does that, and also make sure you know how any sales taxes will be paid. One of the things that is important for you to understand about a contract is the integration clause. There is always a clause in these contracts that basically says that the written contract controls everything, and that anything you discussed orally with the salesman in your conversations is no longer part of your deal unless it's spelled out in that contract. So if they said something like, if something goes wrong with your transmission in the first year, we will replace it free of charge, make sure that's in the written agreement. If it's not, you can't go back later in most places and argue that you were told something differently. Finally, if you decide that you're not happy with the written contract, don't sign it and hope you'll be able to work it out later. If there's a mistake in there, the dealer may sometimes say, well, we'll just ignore that because we don't want to have to go back and redo all the paperwork all over again, but we'll all agree that that's not actually the term that we're going to be using in our deal. Don't agree to that. Make sure that they reprint the paperwork, even if it takes a few minutes, and that it's done correctly. If they pressure you to sign it when you don't want to, walk out. As hard as it is, don't sign the paperwork unless you're happy with it. So that's our video on sales contracts. We'll see you next time. Until then, remember, you got this.